Together here. Welcome to the 82nd Avenue presentation and meetings. We appreciate you making your time. All right. Come on, folks. We're going to try to get started here. All right. Well, thank you for making the time to come. We hope that you find this informative. This is a meeting organized through the 82nd Avenue Improvement Coalition and Jade Apano, as well with the U of O Design School. So a lot of effort to put this together. This is a presentation put together by private citizens and students from the U of O, University of Oregon Design School, to discuss what 82nd Avenue could look like, what the low-hanging fruit is, given the situation that is owned by the state of Oregon, but sitting in the middle of the city of Portland. I'm also a private citizen that would like to see 82nd Avenue be a functional road for business, and have been working on the past 4 years to try to make this happen with the 82nd Avenue Improvement Coalition, but really have been working on 82nd Avenue issues for the past 10 years, at one point with Dan Saltzman in the past, so it's good to see you again. Thank you. Again, most of these presenters, or all these presenters here tonight, are not professional presenters. They are covering a lot of content. They are students and citizens that have given up their time away from their friends and family and businesses to be here tonight, so let's respect that. If you hear something that you really like, we're asking that you wave these signs and show support, to silently support the message tonight. And then when we're done with the presentations, we will have time for public comment. There is also public comment cards that you can fill out in the back table, and there is a gray utility bin that you can put those cards in as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this off to Thuy.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening to Midsummer Night's Dream. Indeed, tonight is a dream that has come true for those of us who live out here in East Portland. Tonight, we get to reimagine 82nd Avenue. I am Thuy Tu with Thuy Tu Consulting. I launched my business 2.5 years ago with a vision and a dream, actually, to bridge the gap between civil engineering, transportation planning, and architecture. Tonight, I come to you as an adjunct professor of the University of Oregon Architecture School, and also an adjunct professor of resiliency at the University of Portland Engineering School. I'm an East Portland resident, as well as a supporter of Opano and the Jade District. And Amanda knows I also sit on the Urban Forestry Commission. We all know that integrating disciplines and practices make a better city. And for me, that means cultivating relationships among experts, academia, the profession, members of the community, and the officials elected to represent everyone. Which brings us to our event tonight. I would like to begin the evening with a gift to you, our city commissioners, Dan Saltzman, Amanda Fritz, Chloe Udaly, and you, Ted Wheeler, and as well as Nick Fish, who is not present today. I'm handing you a collection of stories, vignettes, if you will, of 82nd Avenue, also known as Oregon Route 213, and the Avenue of the Roses. Many of us see this either as a highway, a boulevard, street, or corridor that has served the city and the state for so many years in so many ways. It is a gem, must I say, lined with amazing food, unique shops, and most importantly, of great people and places. And to me, 82nd Avenue is a gateway to the International District. The J District alone includes 70 distinct languages and a myriad of ethnicities. It is an international destination without a plane ticket. Tonight, you will hear stories of future visioning and transformation from my students. You will also hear voices from the community who live, work, play, and essentially live and exist here on 82nd Avenue. Following, you will hear the views of the community and voices from the streets during public testimony. Finally, you will hear the work currently been undertaken by the Oregon Department of Transportation and the Portland Bureaus of Transportation and Planning and Sustainability. But before we begin, I would like to take a moment to check the pulse of the room. I'd like to see the show of hands of those who live on east of 82nd. How about west of 82nd? How about those who do business on 82nd? And dare I ask, who lives on 82nd? And now I'm going to turn the spotlight back to you, really to you, our elected officials, whom I've invited out here. Please share a moment. Please take a moment to share with us your favorite memory of 82nd Avenue.
Well, I'll pick an easy one because it's fresh in my mind being in this room. During my campaign for mayor, I had a chance to be right here in this room meeting with the young folks who were involved in OPAL, Environmental Action. And it was a great meeting. It was a lot of fun. It was fun to see a lot of young people from the community come out, share their thoughts and their ideas. A lot of that was focused around transportation and access to TriMet youth passes, but there were a number of other issues that we had the opportunity to talk about as well. And it reflected the kind of thinking that you had just mentioned. It was a very diverse, well-informed group of young people from our community. In many respects, they represented the future. And I remember leaving with a couple of my campaign staffers and going, man, these people, they've got it going. These young people in this room understand the issues, they understand what's at stake, they understand what needs to be done. And I remember just leaving and thinking, I had a lot of confidence in the future of this community.
Thank you.
Well, I have lots of favorite spots for shopping and dining, but I'd have to say that my favorite 82nd Avenue memory would have to be every time I have the soup at HA and VL Sandwich Shop, which is right down the street. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I think my favorite memory is participating in the first Avenue of Roses parade, and I'm loath to guess how many years ago that was, but I think it was around 10 years ago. But it was really a big occasion, not only for the organizers of the parade, but along the parade route you could just see the welling pride of East Portland residents in the fact that this parade was happening, that members of the city council and the mayor were all participating in it. So it really was a momentous event to me.
Yeah, for me too, the for 82nd Avenue of Roses Parade, that's the kickoff to the parade season. It's the first one that we go to citywide, and it's always been one of my favorites too. But I was thinking back over some of the things that have happened. I mean, 82nd goes a long way, as we all know. So, you know, there's the Montevilla Community Center on 82nd. One of my favorite memories was when I was visiting Madison High School. Matt Sten, who used to be a teacher there, who was the brother of Eric Sten, was teaching a civics class, and he would invite elected officials and aspiring to be elected officials to go talk with his class. And I happened to be asked to go one time on my birthday, and they put on the sign on Madison High School, "Happy Birthday, Amanda Fritz," which is the first time I've ever had my name on a billboard, I think.
Thank you. What's next? And now I want to turn our attention to the recent graduates of the University of Oregon Architecture Program. Please allow me to thank the collaborative efforts of the agencies and communities within the city of Portland who participated in the class as either presenter of the panel discussion or worked directly with my students on their project. My friends and colleagues at FHWA Western Federal Lands, ODOT Region 1 Planning Group, City of Portland Bureaus PBOT, BPS, BES, Metro, TriMet, the staff at Opano, the communities of 82nd, and my consultant friends and colleagues. Here is Tim Smith of Sarah Architects, the lead instructor of the Urban Design Studio.
Thank you, Twee. Only applaud the students, not me. So, can I have the first slide? So we did a studio. This is a studio from last year, so spring 2016. And we had 21 students from the University of Oregon. And the first thing we did was, and these are all architecture students, so the first thing we did was we took a big look at East Portland. And you can see right here something really interesting popped out to us. If you look at the area of Portland between the Willamette River eastward, East 82nd is about the geographic center of that area. So what we were looking at is something that has an opportunity to actually be the center of this whole part of Portland. And we thought that was really an important thing. Next slide, please. Here's a view looking northward down East 82nd Avenue from an airplane, which we were not hanging from when we took it. It was taken for us. Next slide, please. And thanks to our collaborators at ODOT, we had a wonderful presentation on the history of East 82nd Avenue. And believe it or not, it used to look like this around the turn of last century, so around the turn of 1900, so about 100 years ago. It was basically a dirt road running through farmland. Next slide. Long around the 1930s, I think 1934, the road was widened to be 4 lanes wide, and you can see that under construction right here. This is around the area of Northeast Broadway and Northeast 82nd, looking northward. So you can see a lot of significant road construction even back in the 1930s during the Depression. Next slide. This is an aerial view looking down at this intersection right here. And we are in this building right here. And you can see back in the 30s, there was kind of a cacophonous intersection back here where things didn't quite line up. And so they were aligned at some point between the late 1930s and today to be the intersection that we have right now. So this is where we are tonight, right now. Next slide. One of the things that became apparent to us when you look at East 82nd right now is that it's really a divider, and a lot of the students were interested in turning it into a unifier. In other words, almost a main street. And indeed, back in the 30s and 40s and even up to the 1950s, there were businesses like this that were built right up to the street frontage along East 82nd Avenue, and they opened right out to the boulevard. And so you don't see a lot of those right now, but this was a pattern that used to exist along East 82nd Avenue. Next slide. And so today, as we walked around the area last year, believe it or not, this was a sunny day in April. You can see that while there are quite a few businesses that are built up to the sidewalk, indicating a kind of urban pattern of development, there's still a lot of surface parking lots and a heck of a lot of traffic out there that really makes East 82nd much more of a dividing line between what's on one side and the other side versus a unifier. Next slide, please. There is a lot of development happening off of East 82nd in some of the neighborhoods. Here's some development in this district here, the Jade District. Next slide. And there's still a lot of areas that look like this, lacking some infrastructure out here, sidewalks, paved streets. And so that was a point of concern, but also an opportunity for the students. When something's not paved, you can actually rethink how you might want to develop it in the future. Next slide. So we were cognizant that the city had a planning effort going on, and so this is just an excerpt from that. Again, looking northward along East 82nd, at the bottom is Lentz, up at the top is Sandy Boulevard, and you can see the idea of a whole series of villages, sort of village centers arrayed along East 82nd Avenue, and that was something that we thought was significant. The idea of trying to make a sense of place and a sense of community along something that doesn't seem to have it to the apparent eye today. Next slide. We were also aware of a lot of the visioning and planning and community efforts happening along East 82nd. The students actually went out into the community and did some canvassing. They had translators with them, so they knocked door to door. They got a lot of really interesting information from people who live in the community. We read some of the planning work that happened, the Jade District Visioning Plan. Next slide, please. We're aware of all the community input into that particular effort. Next slide. And a lot of the visioning work that came out of there, it really had a wonderful amount of input from the community, all the communities along East 82nd Avenue. Next slide. We also, this is a group of the students in our studio in the White Stag building in downtown Portland. And we were just so grateful to have the participation from people in the community. This is Michael Sonnleitner from Montevilla. We had Brian Wong, who you just met at the very beginning, who helped us out. Stephen Rice from Montevilla. We had Lou, I see standing back there, who came in and talked to us as well. Todd Struble and Duncan Huang came in and also gave us a tour. Anita Yap, we were very grateful. She came and actually gave a full presentation to the students about the history and some of the issues along East 82nd. And of course, Twee, who helped organize a lot of this effort. So we had a wonderful amount of community input. There's clearly a lot of energy out here about this place. Next slide. So we had some assumptions that we wanted to make sure the students have going forward. We wanted them to be looking 20 years out. So the work you see along the walls here and the 2 or 3 presentations you're going to hear tonight, we asked them to step outside of day-to-day life on East 82nd and really begin to envision a long-term future 20 years out. We also asked them to assume the possibility that perhaps someday the city of Portland could own East 82nd rather than ODOT, and what that might mean for the future. That may be a popular sentiment to take note of. We also asked them to assume that we're going to have to assume that growth is going to continue in the Portland region and that it's going to need to find places to go that are and be expressed in terms of affordable housing, about jobs, about equity, and that this seemed to be an ideal place for a lot of those issues to be resolved in East Portland. And so growth is real. And finally, we asked them to assume that climate change is real. And so we thought that was pretty significant to some of the work that they came up with. Next slide, please. Some of the big themes that came out of the work of the students, again, this idea of transforming what looks to be a traffic barrier into something that could actually be a people and community unifier was a big theme. The idea of creating a real sense of place and a sense of community out here. There is a wonderful sense of community out here. We think it could be reinforced by some really strong placemaking, making wonderful physical environments that support the great communities out here. We asked them, and they responded with ideas about enhancing multimodal connectivity so we could reduce reliance on the car, the single occupancy vehicle. And we also asked them to take a look into the future. So we're 20 years out here. We're going to be looking at a future of driverless cars and all sorts of forms of transit. And so that was all on the table. And then finally, the idea of planning for economic, social, and ecological resilience. We thought that was a really important point for the students as a point of departure. Next slide, please. So along the resilience path, we asked them to critique our present way we use resources, which is basically a linear way where we have things like food, water, energy, goods and services that come into communities, they get gobbled up and they get spat out the other end of a community in terms of getting thrown away, maybe into a landfill or something. Next slide, please. So we asked them to take a look at a different paradigm, which is more of a circular economy out here, where there's possibly an elimination of the idea of waste, and one person's or one business's waste can be an input for another business or another family. Next slide. And so toward that end, we introduced the concept of civic ecology out here, which involves heavy citizen engagement, sustainable placemaking, and a really deep look at resource flows, energy, water, waste, food, local economy. How can you actually add those to the urban design mix? Next slide. Because the belief is that it's not enough to just design the physical place, you've also got to be thinking about some of the resource flows of social capital, healthy communities as part of the mix. Next slide. So on behalf of all 21 students in the studio, I'm now going to turn it over to 2 of the students who are going to walk you through a couple of the projects. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So I'm Ben Fike, and I'll be presenting 2 concepts for developing 2 communities on 82nd, specifically around Gleason and 82nd and Division and 82nd. And this is part of Alan Taylor's project. Will be on Gleason and 82nd, and mine will be on the Division 82nd as part of Tim Smith's Urban Design Studio. Next slide, please. So, as a studio, we identified the neighborhoods around East Portland, and we looked at what they could be like in the future as these independent and interdependent communities where you could live, work, and play all in the same community. And then you can use streetcar and public transportation to access the other communities to do more than the day-to-day activities. Next slide. And so specifically, we looked at the communities surrounding 82nd and identified where these centers would be that we could give higher density to, which would allow for this kind of live, work, play, placemaking. So specifically, this site I will be showing it will be the Gleason and 82nd first, and then Division and 82nd, and then we'll be seeing a project at the Eastport Plaza. Next slide, please. So Alan's project is taking the idea of a gradient of density to create place. So having high density at the center, in this case, the intersection of Gleason and 82nd, and then taper that out to have the low density of what's currently in the area, mostly single-family residential. Next slide. So he took that idea of the gradient of density and identified nodes along 82nd that would be good for this, kind of seeing the most dense at the center of these villages and less dense around the edges. Next slide. So he identified the, currently at Gleason and 82nd, there's a lot of commercial along the streets, and then there are a park and 2 schools also at this intersection. Next slide. And so the idea would be to add density at the intersection and then also along the park and schools. So this would be surrounding the park and schools with density would allow for more people to access the parks and kind of make it safer through people being there. And then you can see the density would start to move out into the single density. Next slide. And so here you can see at more detail what that would look like. So at the intersection of Gleason and 82nd, you have the most dense kind of mixed use. So commercial and offices on the first few floors, and then residential higher, as well as kind of medium density residential around what you can see of the red are the 2 schools. Next slide. And this is 2 examples of what buildings could look like at the center of this kind of neighborhood, where you have a variety of housing types, which would allow a lot of different people to live in the same area and stay there for a longer period of time. Next slide. And so at the heart of this neighborhood is where you would have these transit lines, which would give people many different options for accessing the rest of the city. And then along that loop, you would have more smaller scale transit bike paths to allow people to access their own community easily. Next slide. And so what this would do, this gradient would give people a lot of options of how they want to live, and they all living close together, creating this place to live, work, and play. Next slide. So my project is focused on how the area around 82nd Division, where we currently are, can be developed economically based on the institutions that are already in this area. Next slide. So we were really interested in the Jade District because it's growing at a rate 3 times faster than the rest of the city, and it really needs this higher density to keep it equitable. And it's also becoming more diverse than over time, which would mean that it needs this variety of housing and job types. Next. So the institutions I found in this area that could be the seeds for future growth would be the Portland Community College, the Harrison Park School, and the Fubon Shopping Center. Next slide. So right now you have students coming from the area to gain leadership skills and business skills at this community college, and I'm proposing a business center around this college which would take advantage of the knowledge and resources at the college. Next slide. And then for this area, I'm thinking of something similar to Alan's loop idea of having higher density housing around the school and the park to give people, many different people, a place to live at the center of this community. Next slide. And then lastly, using the Fubon Shopping Center as a seed for future growth as like an ethnic restaurant center, where it would be a place for the restaurants to use the food and resources at the shopping center, and then people would come from all over the city to eat, and it would become this cultural and recreational gathering center. Next slide. And so to take these 3 different clusters and make them into one community, I'm thinking of a walking trail that weaves throughout all the major nodes in this community. So you walk up along 82nd and do your shopping, and then you stop at the Jams for a cultural event. You might take a class at the Portland Community College. You would see check the community gardens at the Harrison Park School, walk through the park, check out the showrooms at the local businesses, and then walk through the pedestrian and bike-oriented streets and hike all the way up to Mount Tabor. Next slide. So what this trail would be is an experiential path for tourism, as well as a way for people to meaningfully navigate through their neighborhood. And so these 3 clusters all come together at the Jams Center, and I'm seeing this as the intersection that brings identity to this community. So, thank you.
Testing, cool. Oh, can we go back to the slideshow? Yeah, next slide, please. That's perfect. So great, thanks to Tim and Twee. This is really awesome, and everyone else who helped put this together. I did my project on Eastport Plaza and what it might mean for that area to be transformed over the coming decades. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, okay, thank you. And of course, it's located at East 82nd and Holgate, right by Marshall High School and about 3/4 of a mile from the Max Green Line. Next slide. I did a spatial analysis on how land is being used in commercial areas around East 82nd and Eastport Plaza. And I found that in this 71-acre area, 20% is devoted to buildings, 32% is devoted to parking, 48% remains, consisting mostly of sidewalks, landscape, and also a lot of roads and drive lanes for parking. This means that there are 9 more acres of asphalt than interior commercial space in the area. And I'm not picking on Eastport. This is typical. But I wonder whether this auto-centric environment is really the best for pedestrians or the civic ecology that Tim and Ben were talking about. Next slide, please. And there also are some really great advantages of this area. There are some local businesses. There are the youths over at Marshall. There are some gorgeous trees. There's the start of a street grid that you can build off of, and there's room for infill in all this parking space. Now the briefest of walking tours. Next slide, please. Here's some of the beautiful flowers on Holgate. Next slide. You can see some of the covered walkways along the buildings. Next slides. But there's an awful lot of blank wall that sort of contrasts with that landscaping. Next slide. Next slide. But that's kind of the nature of these single-use shopping centers. There's no reason to linger outside. Next slide. And well, with some exceptions, here's the cafe seating sort of at the entrance, right at Holgate and East 82nd. Next slide. So here's the existing, the outline. You have your Walmart, the shopping centers, HK Cafes over there, Joanne Fabrics. And what I'm proposing is, next slide, is incremental transformation from a single-use, auto-oriented shopping center to a mixed-use, pedestrian-oriented village. Next slide. And it could look something like this, with a community center to ground it, a plaza for events, open park space, buildings with courtyards. Whatever parking needs there still are can be centralized in a parking garage up above. And I really believe that a focus on affordable housing and local business is important if this move forward. Next slide. And so I was kind of thinking about this project in terms of 3 types of streets that might be developed in the area. We could change these auto-oriented arterial streets and transform them into pedestrian-oriented multimodal streets, connecting people with bus rapid transit to the rest of the city. Next slide. So imagine cutting vertically across the street, and this is what you could see, something 4 to 8 stories tall. You have wide sidewalks for cafe seating, a separated bike lane that's protected by a line of trees from the bus rapid transit lane, still a lane for cars. Just an example of what it could look like. Next slide. Next in the hierarchy are the auto-oriented collector streets that could be transformed into pedestrian-oriented multimodal streets. And along these streets, there could be the spaces for deliveries to all those local businesses. Next slide. And here's a slide section cut showing that, where there's still car traffic and deliveries, but it's at a slower pace that's more comfortable for pedestrians. Next slide. And here is a example. And finally, there's the type of street that is sort of rare in Portland, but a sort of pedestrian alley with either a commercial or a residential focus, a place for cafe seating, for children to play, and cars would not be allowed. But next slide. And so it could be something narrow. 15 feet might be on the brink. Maybe that's too narrow. Who knows? But so it's a comfortable and quiet street. And there's really active storefronts. And so just to show some examples, pictures of buildings, and get your imagination going, We'll go to the next slide. So here's an example of how the mix could be inside of a building. Have a commercial on the first floor, you have a few floors of office space, and then residential above, and some balconies to look out on the street. But of course, it could be anywhere from 4 to 8 stories and any sort of combination of uses. It wouldn't have to be all 3. Next slide. And then finally, there are just a few images of the type of scale and type of building that could be built here. Next slide. Maybe it's very futuristic. This is Ken Yang. He's an architect in China, I believe. Next slide. Maybe some of the alleys have a very residential, sort of quieter nature to them. Next slide. Maybe they're busy. Maybe there are a couple of busy streets with a lot of market activity right flowing onto it. Next slide. Or maybe it's a quieter place to eat and graffiti on walls. No, just kidding. Next slide. But really, most importantly, I think Eastport Plaza could transform into a place where people want to gather. So, thank you.
So we have a little bit of time if there were a couple of burning questions anyone wanted to ask. Thank you, you guys. That was great. From the commissioners or anyone in the audience? Yes. Is that Michael back there? I'm sorry, I can't hear. Can you get a copy? Can you get a copy of the presentation? Yes, I think we can make that available to, and we'll figure out how to do that. Yes. The answer is yes, and we'll make it happen. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
That you're looking at? What is your age group that you're looking at? Are you wanting total family units? Are you having more elderly people because we are getting old? Are you going to have facilities like assisted livings and things like that? Is that going to be part of your plan as well to go old?
Yes, I think one of the ideas that all the students had was that this ought to be an inclusive community for all ages, all ethnic groups, and that would be assisted facilities as well mixed in throughout. I think one of the really strong ideas that we heard from a lot of the projects was that we shouldn't separate these things into little separate ghettos, but they really should be integrated because we know a lot of these groups like to interact with each other. And so, yes, that was going to be a really important part of that. It's an excellent question. You're pointing, yeah. Hang on a second, I'll be Monty Hall. Let's make a deal.
So just speaking of integration, I'm just thinking about the great work with Multicultural Collaborative on greening Jade and how this complements the planning effort on this end.
Yeah. Thank you. Hang on a second. Wait, is this the last question? Yeah. Okay, last question.
This isn't a question, but a statement that I love seeing a rail line on 82nd Avenue in some of these.
You love seeing a rail line on 82nd Avenue. Okay, that's great. You know, we had a lot of discussion about whether there seemed to need to be some kind of transit along 82nd, whether it's rail, whether it's a tram, whether it's bus rapid transit, who knows, but something of a rapid transit. Okay, good. Thank you. So, who am I going to turn it back to? To Brian. Okay, thank you everyone for your kind attention. By the way, you just saw the work from 3 students, but there's many more projects arrayed along the wall, so please after the meeting, take a chance and look at some of the wonderful work that the students did focused on your community. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. So at this point, you saw some concepts presented by the design studio from the University of Oregon. And the idea was to get the juices flowing of what 82nd Avenue could look like. So at this point, we're going to turn it over to some invited testimony from neighbors and citizens that live along 82nd Avenue. And so at this point, I'm going to introduce Todd Struble. He will come and talk. Oh. And then following that, I will talk about some specific transportation requests of 82nd Avenue. And then we have, do you want to introduce her? Jessica. Okay, we'll let Jessica introduce herself. But a little nervous.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. Commissioners, my name is Todd Struble, for the record, Toddstruble. First, thank you to Twee, Brian, and Tim for putting this together. I really appreciate the time and energy that it took to gather all the people that came here tonight. I serve as the Jade District Manager, overseeing the Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative as part of the city and Prosper Portland's neighborhood economic development strategy. The mission of the Jade District is to build power, health, and stability for this community. All of our work is centered on resisting the pressures of displacement for the residents and businesses here. We also want to create healthy outcomes and give our residents a voice in their local government. To that end, we went through an extensive visioning process in 2014 that you may have seen a few references to already. But we wanted to ask folks, what investments can we work on to support you? There was alignment around 4 priorities. 1, transportation justice. 2, a neighborhood home for all. Number 3, small business development. And number 4, parks and green space. Those were all commonly identified issues that we really need more support around. And I'm proud tonight that you will hear directly from our community members who live and work in this neighborhood. And we appreciate City Council's willingness to come to East Portland, and also recent investments in the trash cans featuring art by one of our local community members. You can see one right outside. Alfredo Gonzalez, one of our volunteers in the city of Portland. Alfredo? Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. So that being said, a town hall is important and appreciated, and it's just a start. We will need your continued support on specific votes that will come across your desks. For example, we were disappointed to learn that the Division Transit Project business mitigation programs were not in the latest budget. We do appreciate the public support for Apano's Roots to Rise campaign, however, and that will transform the space that we're all sitting in here tonight into affordable housing and a cultural center. Please help us make that vision a reality by following through on the $400,000 ask that we've put in front of you. For now, though, I would like to turn it over to our community members, and thank you again for your time. I think we're going to go Brian and then Jessica. Okay.
I'm going to walk around. I don't sit very well. I'm a nurse by background, and I got to move, so I can't help it. It's just hard to work out of the system. So, as I mentioned, I am here to talk about specific traffic requests. There's so much that we can ask out of 82nd Avenue. So, I really wanted to get down to really specific things, and then it really came down to one thing, even though I know there's just a ton of things that we can do. Next slide, please. Because one of the first things I get asked when talking about 82nd Avenue and what needs to be done is, where do we start? And so I think that's where we're going to come to, is like, where do we start? Next slide, please. First, I want to mention that 82nd Avenue currently has a design standard that maintains it as a highway. I contend that 82nd Avenue can't even meet this own design standard. It, at best, is a sort of highway. I would like to see 82nd Avenue had design standard change so it can work more like a functional, walkable street, a neighborhood street. Next slide, please. The concept adopted by the city of Portland is Vision Zero. It is a design standard that is multi-nation. It's designed to reduce traffic deaths of pedestrians. And that is a concept that I would like to see, a design standard that I would like to see personally adopted to 82nd Avenue. Next slide, please. One of the key features of Division Zero is pedestrian crossings, and that's what I want to talk about. There are several ways, and specifically pedestrian-controlled crossings. That means the pedestrian can actually pause the traffic to safely get across the street. Let's face it, that's 5 lanes of high-speed, high-volume traffic. The pedestrian cannot compete. There's just no way. So here in front of Eastport Plaza, you have a rapid flashing beacon. It's designed where the pedestrian can push the button, the yellow lights flash, causing the traffic to pause, and that pedestrian can safely cross the street using the painted crosswalk in the pedestrian island. Next slide, please. Your next type of pedestrian-controlled intersection is really your traditional, typical intersection, complete with push button for pedestrians, traffic signals to stop the traffic, a painted crosswalk, and other treatments here. So this is 82nd Avenue and Burnside. This picture here showcases the work that ODOT has put into it to meet some of these needs, but more needs to be done. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, 82nd Avenue has a lot of uncontrolled intersections, which means the pedestrian has no way of stopping the traffic. In this case here, you've got 82nd Avenue and Pacific. You have a traffic island up there in the middle. There, you could barely see it behind that white car. There is no crosswalk. There is no push button. The pedestrian is completely reliant on the traffic first seeing that pedestrian hiding behind the telephone pole and then stopping. So those are 2 things that have to happen. You have to have that happen on 4 lanes across 82nd Avenue. That's a tall ask. Next slide, please. Even more so is that 82nd Avenue has tons and tons of unmarked intersections. An ODOT study done in 2012 found that on average, there is a pedestrian-controlled intersection every 1,000 feet, but there is an unmarked intersection probably about 1 block, so I forget how many feet that is. My math is escaping me. So I can't imagine, so 1,000 feet, so that is almost a quarter mile or the distance of a football field a pedestrian has to go on average to get to a pedestrian-controlled intersection. With 5 lanes and a busy turn lane, again, I don't think pedestrians can compete with traffic. I do have to say that in Oregon, every intersection marked or otherwise is a legal intersection. Next slide, please. Which brings me to enforcement. Enforcement is listed as a strategy to improve pedestrian safety. Unfortunately, on 82nd Avenue, I don't think it works out very well. In 2015, Portland Police did a crossing enforcement action on 82nd Avenue. And in 4 hours, they cited 61 people for failure to stop for pedestrians. I contend that Portland Police could probably do that every day with very little effect. This was a record. I don't know if it's been broken. The previous record was 55 citations on 31st and Powell. Next slide, please. So, if more pedestrian controlled crossings are the answer, then what specifically do we need to do to make that happen? Next slide, please. Well, we can add more pedestrian controlled crossings. We can start with the uncontrolled pedestrian islands that don't have any pedestrian controls to them. So I think there are 4 to 6 pedestrian islands on 82nd Avenue that do not have any pedestrian controls on. Let's put some flashing beacons on it. That would be a great start. Yes, thank you. Get those signs up. All right, next slide, please. How about a little art? Why not put some art in those crosswalks? How about some community pride there? It's not a tall ask. I bet you there are a number of neighborhood associations, nonprofits, business associations, you name it, that would love to design their own crosswalk. Can we not design our own crosswalk? Yes, thank you. Next slide, please. And while we're out there, how about a pedestrian scramble? A pedestrian scramble stops all 4 pieces, allows the pedestrian to go on one crosslight from one side of the street to the other instead of going through 2 traffic cycles to get to the opposite corner. So let's do a pedestrian. I have to say that I know 82nd Avenue is a busy street. These streets are even wider than 82nd Avenue, so if they can do it, we can do it. Next slide, please. How do we know that 82nd Avenue has truly been on the way to being transformed? Curb extensions must show up. That is a transformational piece of architect. A curb extension literally extends the sidewalk into the traffic lane, shortening the distance, allowing the pedestrian to cross safely. That also significantly changes the traffic flow. Now you have a place for a bus pullout. Now you have a place for freight to pull in to get off the highway to offload their traffic. They don't have to sit in the middle of the highway to do that now. You also have places for on-street parking. How radical would that be to have on-street parking on 82nd Avenue? Then the property owners along 82nd Avenue can use some of that lot size to do otherwise. It doesn't all have to go to parking. Next slide, please. So with that, once you get the curb extensions, then the options just come flying. So could someday 82nd Avenue be this friendly? Maybe. Next slide, please. So that's why I feel that 82nd Avenue should have Vision Zero design concepts applied to 82nd Avenue to allow us to formulate the street to meet our needs, whether it's neighborhood nodes or what have you. But I think getting the pedestrian across 82nd Avenue is a great start to take us towards where we need to go to make 82nd Avenue a much better place to be. Next slide, please. So, to prove my point, I would like to, if you put your contact information in as you entered, we will have a crossing party on 82nd Avenue. I will invite on a date to be determined, and we'll document our experience getting across 82nd Avenue. I'd love to have you come. Council members, would you come across 82nd Avenue with me? All right. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. That is all I have.
Hello, City Council. My name is Jessica Lee, spelled L-I. I have lived in the J District for 4 years. I choose to live here because it is so convenient. My daughter attends Harrison Park School, and we are close to grocery store, and my husband works at the restaurant in this neighborhood. Last year, the property sold to the new owner, and they increased the rent, and we worried how we could afford the rent. And we didn't know where to look for the affordable place to live. With the help of Apano and Legal Aid of Oregon, they helped us stabilize the rent for a longer time, but we still worry about what we will do after that. We still live in the apartment. They increased the rent, but we have no choice because the houses are so expensive. We can't afford it right now. Me and my husband both work hard in restaurant, but life still tough. So I urge City Council to build more affordable housing to help low-income families to buy a house. I like Portland. I like this neighborhood and community, and I hope to see my children and neighbors continue to grow here to the future. Thank you.
My name is Jenny, and I came to the United States for about more than 35 years. And I graduated from Portland State University, and I really like this place. And I shopping here, and I go to restaurant here, so I have a property here. So what I want to point out is we need help to get rid of all the homeless people. I really think we need not only build affordable housing for those people, but put in some kind of program and educate them and teach them how to become self-efficient. And just like when I was in school, there's a program called Work Study. So government pay half or maybe 70% to the school, hire those low-income students. And school only pay 30%. But the students has a job, and they work through their school and get graduate. And I think there's some kind of program and the city should put out, rather than just put out the housing, but also put out some the program, help them to learn skill and help the employer and hire them. Say, for example, and the minimum wage is $15. And maybe government can pay $5 per hour if you hire somebody which is homeless. And the employer can pay 10%, like $10. So work out, give them a chance to get a job. If they are good in 1 year, and then, of course, people want to hire them. But if they don't do well, they will know what is the problem. Instead, right now, and I feel we are nice people, nice city, and we just hand out money to them. And some people choose not work so they can get a low-income benefit. And also for like the place they hand out, and I know they are not belong to the city, they belong to the transportation, but can we help, like put a garbage can next to the bus stop, okay, and they build a chair there, they build some shade there, but they don't put a garbage can there. So what's happened is those people waiting and they drink, they eat, and they throw garbage away, and then the wind blows it. And you will see them on the street, on the sidewalk, everywhere. And as a property owner, and I have to pick them up. And this not representable for people, and they visit our city. And also the people ask for money, and they stay next to the freeway stop. And I think we need to think about what we can do to help transportation, all that, to improve this situation. Yeah, and also for the restroom, and I know there's a lot of problem. I see people and behind my trash enclosure, and they just pee there during the daytime. And the reason is all the business refuse to have them coming in. They make it very messy, and also they do drug inside the restroom. But and there any way city can put up some public restroom for them and have people clean them during the certain time. And that's maybe make people, and when they walk through, say, if they don't want to take a drive, and they can walk, and they have a place to go to the restroom. But that's just, I'm thinking to improve this place rather than build lots of high-rising, building, and we should make the place safe, clean first. I'm finished.
Hello, my name's Anita Yap. Welcome, Mayor Wheeler and City Council. Thank you for coming. I also want to recognize, I saw our State Representative Alyssa Kenny-Geyer and also State Senator Michael Dembro as well. So thanks for coming to our neighborhood. What I wanted to start out with, we talked about what is your connection to 82nd Avenue. And so I have family connections here. My father worked at Portland Community College Southeast Center when it was where Fubon is now. And my mother was a nurse at the Kaiser Clinic that was torn down by PCC a few years ago. And I have to admit, when I was in high school, I grew up in East Portland, 82nd Avenue was the place to cruise. So I cruised 82nd in cars with my friends in high school. So it has a heart in with me. So I live here in the neighborhood. My husband and I, Craig, and our kids live here and have lived here for over 10 years. So it's nice to be back in the neighborhood. I'm also a principal and founder of the Multicultural Collaborative. I was also a member of the board of Apano and the Jade District. And so we've been working here since at least 2012, and PDC designated the Jade District, and Apano became the fiscal sponsor. And our consulting firm actually conducted the first community visioning, and it was done in 5 languages. And the community vision that you saw resulted in Apano getting funding to have the first night market at the Fubon Shopping Center, and now it's at PCC and here, and this will be our 4th year. So there's been some really great progress here in the community. As part of that, Todd mentioned that there's a number of themes that came out of the community vision, and one of them related to green and connected spaces. So our multicultural team was honored to be awarded from the Environmental Protection Agency a grant, actually a contract, to work with Multnomah County Sustainability Department and Apano called Greening the Jade. So it's really relating to green infrastructure. As you know, the Jade District is park deficient. There's no public parks here, and we've been working for a number of years to identify some sites. So as part of this project, the Multnomah County and Apano identified 3 sites, and one of them was a park site that's central to the Jade District. So we held a 3-day design workshop. We had over 100 people show up. Our team of urban design consultants and architects are multicultural. We held a number of workshops in Vietnamese and Cantonese as well, and our urban designers were able to engage directly with the community, which is really awesome. And we came up with some really great concepts. A lot of the work that the students did, it's nice. I invited Tim and his students to come and participate here when he was looking for a project, so it's wonderful to have this kind of attention as well. So as part of the workshop, we're talking about green infrastructure, talking about what is green infrastructure. It has to do with not only parks, but trails, what stormwater systems look like. They don't always have to be in the street. And how do we connect those with all these unimproved streets as well? And then what came out of this actually is not just storm drainage facilities and parks, but a larger vision that's connected to the Jade District. One of them had to do with affordable housing. And how do we look at improvement here that will not displace the residents and the businesses here? And so a lot of the things that we talked about had to do with economic empowerment of the residents here and the businesses, so that we build strength and businesses rather than importing with them. So our Jade District does a lot of work with PCC and the small business as well. But also having housing that is affordable to the community, and also having some pride in ownership. You've heard about some of the concerns about litter and vandalism and homelessness. And as we engage with the community, even some of the people who were homeless or people who were getting displaced really care about this community. So how do we gather everybody to understand how important this is, help them understand this is part of their home as well? So we're really excited to look at things related to public health. We've been working with the Multnomah County Health Department related to air quality in Heat Island. Active transportation and safety in particular, as you know about Powell and Division and the number of fatalities that we've had out here. And then, like I said, safety and crime prevention. It's really important, and we can do this through design, we can do this through community organizing, and I think we're still working on this, and there's a long ways to go, but just the amount of attention and support we've gotten lately is really great. So we will be refining our vision in the next few months, working with EPA and the county and Apano, so stay tuned for that. There's some really great opportunities that we're looking at. What we really need is the implementation piece. There's a number of projects with Oregon Solutions and other folks that have been working in this area, invested by the city. Thank you for that. Metro, TriMet, and the state. So if we can really leverage these in a manner, again, that will support the community to stay and live here and encourage the development that does happen here is for the community, we would be really thankful for that. So thank you for your time.
So at this point, we have time, and we would like to, if there's people in the audience, if you have a question, or council members who have questions or thoughts that you would like to share, we'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are, what your vision of 82nd Avenue would be.
Oops. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, for being out here. It's really exciting to have you here listening to our community. This is a great event. My name is John Mulvey. I live in this area. I'm a member of the 82nd Avenue Improvement Coalition, and I'm also co-chair of the East Portland Action Plan Housing Committee. So I want to talk about housing and what that means in this area. Most of us who are active in this community are very supportive of more development coming in. We recognize that the city is growing, and we recognize that this area, given the transit connections, given the accessibility to downtown, is a kind of a ripe area for that to happen. But what we really want to see is some steps taken to ensure affordability of the housing in this area. This could easily, within a matter of just a couple of years, turn into some of the neighborhoods that we've seen closer in that have become unaffordable. So what I really would call on you to do is think about the next generation of community planning. In other words, Portland has a habit of patting itself on the back for how enlightened it is. A lot of that planning that earned us that reputation is 20, 25, 30 years old. Today's enlightened planning needs to plan for affordable housing. And that's not just drawing lines on a map and saying we'll put housing here and we'll put businesses there and that sort of thing. That's the old thinking. The new thinking is when we think about this corridor, we need to have a strategy in mind, an affordability strategy that is implementable, that has resources, that has teeth to it. So that's what I would call on you to do when you're thinking about 82nd Avenue. Gary?
Mayor, Councilman, thank you for coming out here. I'm Gary Sargent. I'm president, vice president, whatever you want to call me. I'm holding two positions on the 82nd Avenue Business Association. I'm a third-generation business owner. We've owned businesses on 82nd and now on Foster Road. I'm here on my birthday because I am a concerned citizen. And you know what that gets me on my birthday at 7-Eleven? I get a free Slurpee. Okay. With that said, I think everybody in the room here would agree that we would wish that the council take a firm yet compassionate policy in regards to homelessness. And I'll give you an example. I recently attended a funeral. My wife's uncle passed away. And their son is a 25-year veteran of the Phoenix, Arizona Police Department. And he corners me at the funeral and he says, Gary, I read all about this news in Portland about this homeless epidemic, and cities are sending their people, homeless people, to the city of Portland, giving them bus tickets to come here. And I said, it is. It's, unfortunately, our mayor had inherited some policies that were very loose. So I would suggest that you take, I asked him, I said, so what do you suggest in this situation? And he says, well, how our city has dealt with it. We have all the social outreach, and we have a firm yet passionate policy in that respect. If the people that are homeless want to take advantage of the programs that we have available, we're here to help. If they don't, we enforce the law. It's vagrancy, and they're driving motorhomes with no licenses on them that are parked on city streets, neighborhoods, and we tow them. We don't rely on the tow companies to, you know, maybe they'll come and tow them and have to deal with this hazardous waste, and now they won't tow them, I understand. So anyway, in Phoenix, they've taken a hard line in it, but yet a compassionate line, because they've put the olive branch out to people who want to be helped. Unfortunately, the previous mayor allowed camping on the Springwater Trail. My business on Foster Road has to deal with very much. You should listen to this lovely lady who's been here for many, many years, what she's saying about what the businesses have to deal with. So as your film there said, you know, where do we start? Well, we need to get social justice here in regards to dealing with the issues at hand. That's a good starting point. A firm policy. You know, I wouldn't want your job, and I applaud you for taking it, Mayor. I just think that if you listen to what the citizens need, the tax-paying citizens that are and the renters that are having to pay these exorbitant rents and create the livability first, that's the best start. Then let's work with the state and get control of 82nd Avenue. It's been a ball back and forth. Who's gonna, you know, you get the finger point. Who's gonna put the curb sidewalks in? Who's gonna do this? As far as these new crosswalks go, I wish that they had a red light and then a flashing yellow light and then a red light. Because a lot of people just go right through the flashing yellows. You need to stop the traffic if you want to create that pedestrian safety. Thank you.
Yeah, hello, dear Mayor, city member, and city staff, and neighborhood and friend. My name is Tim, and I live on 82nd. In fact, I met Dan Saltzman and Amanda when we was changing the zoning on Southeast 82nd. I owned a block on 82nd between Bybee and Southeast Cooper. It's a pretty good size of land, and we changed the zoning in 2005. Finally, it's going through, but we have the big barrier wall right now that we can't, whatever we turn in the plan to the city, it gets shut down, and it never go through. I'm working right now with Grad and Twee. I saw some design that was presented up there, it's really, really good. But in reality, when you submit to the city, it's not going to go through. As you all know, 82nd is the highway belong to ODOT. And also, what you want to build is going to be on either behind the sidewalk of 82nd on both sides, east and west, is belong to City of Portland. So anything that you design to work for PDOT is not going to work for ODOT because the design is ODOT C is the 82nd is a highway. So whatever you design is for highway specification. And what we turn in to build is for PDOT, which is city street. And both regulations never work. I've been battled. I changed the zoning. Thank you that the city council all approve it. And I work with neighborhood really hard. I bought it since 2002. I married in 2001. My wife is a lawyer, and I built a business there on 82nd, and she practiced there. Also, I own a couple of restaurants here in Southeast Portland, Northeast Portland on 82nd by Eastport Plaza. I saw a lot of proposals that were on Eastport Plaza. That's where my business is. It looked pretty good. It's already existing, but why do we need to change something that's already existing? I have over 2 acres in 82nd that I tried to develop for over 15 years. And it's a lot of money and effort that we put it in, and we haven't given up yet. And I live here for so long, and I also own business. I employ over 30 employees right now. And I would love to see that it will be changed. And we try to, I'm exhausted right now that I designed the building I changed the zone that we zone for R2A, RH, residential, high density, also commercial. So it's a commercial zone, but I cannot build commercial building because it's due to the traffic rate. So it showed on the plan was Twee and the group of university professional design on mixed use, which I really like that. But reality is can't, because based on the square feet and the purpose of commercial use, you have is how many traffic count, how many parking spaces you're going to have in. I propose to build a little strip mall, but I can't because of the trip rate. I have to build, when I change the zoning, they put so much restriction on it that we have to build minimum of 38 units apartment first. After that, we can build commercial building. But if anybody come in and want to develop, want to buy the land to build apartment, but they can, because they have to buy the whole block to build commercial and residential, which is not in the business in. If anybody want to come in and develop commercial building, but they have to buy the whole block, and they have to build first minimum 38 units up to 53 units apartment complex, but they're not in the business to build apartment. So I'm stuck right now. I just finished phase one with the, which is a building on 82nd, 11,000 square feet, but I cannot finish the parking lot right now. I proposed it just shut down last year. So it's designed, the space, the commercial is big, but you can't not have so much traffic in there. If you finish the residential first, and you can, 2 acres, you can have maybe 5,000 square feet of the building for commercial. So it's really struggle. I don't know if University of UofO been working with the Department of Planning and Zoning downtown, but it's really struggle. I've been working for 15 years trying to develop it, and I wish we have some more time. We can sit down, we work through this out. I can explain to you more. And right now I'm dealing with, and you can hear a lot of neighbors complaining about homeless. I get fined like $5,000, $10,000. That homeless live on a street and vanish the vehicle and throw garbage on my property, and I get fined for that. And even the piece of garbage on the curb, not even on my property, I still have a violation on it. And I call inspector, I talked to him on the picture he showed me, the piece of garbage on the street, on the curb, and they still get a ticket, but he said he don't care, it's on my property. But it's not about that. Cleanup is not an issue. The issue is, I came here in 1984 as an immigrant. My dad passed away as a teenager. I worked very hard. I built up American dream. Me and my wife is a lawyer. She's a lawyer. I'm an engineer. I'm a civil engineer. In fact, my brother's here. He's a bridge design for ODOT. My sister's here. She's a highway and roadway design for ODOT also. And we all work together, try to help me to get the development going as a family. But it's just, at this point now, we are giving it up. We can't even sell it. We can't even develop it. Every year we pump in $50,000, $60,000 property tax on the property we own, and we can't even build anything on it. That's a struggle that I have right now. And I hope that somehow the planning and zoning downtown that can make it a little bit easier for the business owner or property owner to develop. I see a lot of potential, like everybody mentioned here on 82nd. I see it 15 years ago. That's why I put all my money and soul to invest into it. And at this point, I'm giving up. I'm exhausted. I just hope somebody take it off my hand and I move away and shut down my business. I right now currently employ over almost 40 employees right now. So I hopefully some miracle change. I continue to do business and live here. Thank you.
So what we're going to ask is, I know there's a lot of people, so if we can keep it to 3 to 4 minutes so we can have time for everyone.
Actually, Brian,
go ahead.
may I, if this is okay? I think this has actually morphed into the public testimony piece, and I've already had 2 people signed up to testify. So could we move to that piece right now, or what would you like to do?
I thought we get this lady and
Okay.
have those.
Hi, my name is Kate Mira. I've lived in the neighborhood for 11 years and currently reside just over on 78th and Market. I also happen to have my own business, Kate's Theatrics, in theatrical entrepreneurship, and I'm the vice president of the IATSE Local 28 Stagehands Union here in Portland. And one of the things that struck me that hasn't been talked about just yet in the presentations is how the arts can help for placemaking, and I greatly appreciated the community art and the murals and the painted crosswalks that were shown, but also see a lot of possibility for performers and buskers and music and art, especially in some of the pedestrian walkways, which reminded me very much of performing in Avignon, France, and parts of Europe that have a very deep history with the entertainment, all of the different entertainment arts, and I personally would love to see that in and around my home. I know many different performers of lots of different ilks, from stagehands to clowns, jugglers, face painters, that all live up and down this part of Portland, and could see all of them using spaces in creative ways.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Mari Valencia and I work with Kogan Owens Green, a planning consulting firm here in Portland. Our firm was contracted by the City of Portland for their Bureau of Planning and Sustainability for their Barriers to Redevelopment project. Twee and myself, we had the privilege of doing the outreach on 82nd Avenue. From beginning in the month of February through March. We walked 7 miles, beginning from Roseway neighborhood down to southeast. Yes, sorry.
South of Lens.
And wow, amazing, amazing. Like Twee stated in the very beginning, the corridor is beautiful, amazing. Over 40 languages are spoken, and it was, every conversation we had was wonderful conversation. We knocked on over 68 business doors, had 30 really great deep conversations, 18 of who were property owners and 12 were renters. We were wanting to understand what barriers, if any, to redevelopment for property owners. And I wanna, most of the conversation was not around that question. It was around some challenges that were that business owners face on a daily basis. Before I go into that, though, I want to say that of these business owners, 2/3 of them have been doing business on the corridor over 10 years. They're fully invested in this corridor. And we asked, why did they start their business? Why did they locate along 82nd Avenue? And a lot of what we heard was the low cost of land, low rent prices, the diversity, and its community members. Nothing but great things to speak about those things. However, most of the conversation was about challenges. We asked them that, what are some challenges that the business owners were facing? And like some of the folks here have said, challenges with drugs, homelessness, prostitution, and crime. And and Twee can add if she'd like, but I can remember 2 conversations that really stuck with me, and actually it echoes some of what I've heard from some of the business owners who've spoken. One being having to fit in time to clean up messes from the day from the previous night, having to fit that time into their business hours to clean up. It's a big challenge. Also, another thing that was stated too was these fines for cleanups that don't belong to them is what we've heard. And another conversation that really resonated with me was that some business owners shared that who we spoke to about challenges with landlord and their relationship about fixing certain things with the property. Lots of challenges that they face. Little, when asked the question about how they, if they thought about redeveloping their site, a good amount said yes. That they would, a lot of what we heard was hoping to expand and hoping to maybe one day redevelop to a mixed-use development. However, these challenges, the challenges that I spoke to, kind of make that vision a little bit farther than what they, for them aspiring to redevelop and whatnot. Again, beautiful, beautiful conversations, beautiful corridor, and yeah. Twee, do you want to add anything to our canvas that we did, if you'd like?
For those who may not know, I grew up here as an immigrant from Vietnam as a product of the Vietnam War. And I grew up not too far from 82nd Avenue as an immigrant community, which was Rose City Village, which is now the Ellington. And so I got to traverse through the corridor in so many capacities over the last 30, almost 40 years. And I got to see it as a child taking the bus, not knowing very little English, to as a consultant now and to a community member. So this is my return back to the corridor, similar to what Anita had said. And it's been such a privilege for me to be involved in so many interesting capacities, from working with Mari and also being a part of the Pono and the Jade District, and also to be here with everybody and to make this happen. But yes, to add to Mari's piece, a couple of important things that came to light was Mari and I were selected to traverse through the corridor mainly because of our language skills. She speaks very well Spanish, and I speak pretty broken English, Vietnamese. But I got to use my Vietnamese again, which I have not in so many ways. So it was great to be able to connect with the business owners, and it was a genuine connection, I believe, in that they were able to talk to us and communicate with us in their own language. And I forget. And sometimes it's interesting to see how the nuances of different cultures and the cultures that I have forgotten because I've become so Americanized. So it was quite the privilege. A couple things that came to matter. First of all, permitting was huge. So any expansion in terms of permitting, going through the city permitting, I actually do permitting also for a living. But that was a huge challenge to businesses. The other piece is parking. So limitations with parking. I understand there's a need for ADA parking. And so parking was a big deal. And the other piece, traffic was interesting because when people liked traffic to some degree. Business owners like traffic because it's traversed through the corridor, it gives them visibility, so they really liked it. So what I saw as a former resident, or even as talking to business owners, there is really a different disconnect between the two in terms of those businesses really love the traffic flow through 82nd, but residents do not. So how do you work with that? So I will leave that to you.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. My name is Luke Norman, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the Portland Bus Lane Project. As you've heard tonight, 82nd Avenue and neighboring Outer Division are home to diverse communities and some great local businesses. Unfortunately, both of these streets are currently failing many Portlanders. Both are on the high crash network corridor, which means that just by using the street, you're disproportionately at risk of being seriously hurt or killed. The Enhanced Transit Corridors has a new proposal by the City of Portland has also identified both of these corridors as areas where if you're taking the bus, you experience significant delay. And that makes it very difficult for people who are trying to get to work, get school, or get back home. For that reason, the Portland Bus Lane is calling for the City of Portland to work with partners, including the Oregon Department of Transportation, to install dedicated transit lanes on both Outer Division and 82nd Avenue. There's a couple of great reasons for that, which we can learn from some of our peer cities who've already implemented those. The city of San Francisco found when they implemented dedicated transit lanes, they saw injury collisions drop by 25%. So there's some huge safety benefits there that can combine with our current Vision Zero efforts. Also, Seattle found when they implemented dedicated transit lanes, they saw travel times go down by 10% and ridership go up by 20%. So that's important both for people who are using the bus today and also as new residents move here, allowing that to be a great, reliable option. And the third piece is really looking, focused specifically on local businesses. When New York City implemented a dedicated bus lane, they saw local business sales increase on that corridor by 20%. Part of the reason for that is it makes it easier for customers to get to businesses, especially customers who don't have a car. And as we know that in Portland, if you're lower income, if you're a person of color, if you have limited English proficiency, you're twice as likely to take the bus regularly than their peers. So this is just allowing more people to come here. It also allows more employees to reach their employment places. It's especially important because people use 82nd Avenue and Division to transfer to other parts of the town. So a bus that's delayed means a missed transfer, which means you're late for work or late for school. We know it'll take courage to implement dedicated transit lanes on both these corridors, but we believe that all residents of Portland, no matter where they live, deserve the ability to use the streets safely and have reliable transit. Thank you.
I'd like to ask, you've heard a lot of presentations from the community and some comments from the people attending. If you had any comments you would like to add, if you wanted to talk about any city investments along 82nd Avenue, what opportunities you see. So I don't know if I wanted to start with Mayor.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, in case this is my last opportunity to say it tonight, I want to say thank you very much. This is a very well thought out forum tonight. I appreciate the opportunity as a mayor and city councilor to actually have the opportunity to sit back and listen to what people's needs are, what their visions are. I heard two main themes tonight. On one hand, I heard about the problems, and I would describe them as traffic congestion, a lack of safety, a lack of jurisdictional support because of the confusion between the overlay between the city and ODOT. We heard about homelessness, we heard about criminality, we heard about trash, we heard about graffiti. Those are problems that may be exacerbated to some degree on 82nd Avenue, but they are not unique to this neighborhood. And wherever we go, we hear about these same issues in some combination in greater or lesser degree. What sets this apart, number one, is the number of people still sitting here an hour and 40 minutes in a very hot room on a beautiful summer night. And I want to reflect on that for a minute. Not every neighborhood can bring this kind of a turnout to not only talk about the problems, but also to hear what I thought were some impressive and compelling visions. And that's the part I'm taking with me tonight. This is a community that is ready and has been ready for a long time for a different vision for this neighborhood using 82nd Avenue as a catalyst. And I feel that the city is well positioned and this city council is well positioned to be a supporter in that effort, whether it's the East Portland Action Plan, whether it's our support of the Pono Community Center, which will soon be taking shape on this site that I think will be catalytic for this community, whether it's continuing to leverage the educational and job training opportunities that are across the street. And I love the street vision, and I particularly liked sort of the Nerd Fest thing we had going on here at the end. I'm totally down with that as a fellow nerd. The fact is, when you slow the traffic, it's better for business. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I won't bore you, but one is, as people come into the community, it's not just that people who are walking or biking feel more safe and feel that it's a more welcoming environment to do their business, but it is also true that as cars slow down and go through the neighborhood, they're not just focused ahead like they are if they're going 45 miles through the city. They shouldn't be, right, Dan? They're actually more aware of what's going on the streetscape to the side. And I really like the vision that some of the students put up, and I look forward to seeing some of these other visions here around the wall. We are committed. The PDC, now called Prosper Portland, continues to support the Prosperity Initiative. I have no news to break tonight, but I can tell you there are big plans that have been discussed around Gateway in particular, but also through the 82nd Avenue corridor. As I said, Apano, some of the other investments that we've been making in this community are going to continue to, I think, be in sync with the ideas that you have. The question around traffic and parking, those are going to continue to be thorny issues. And there's no easy solution there, and I want to be just transparent. I'll just give you my perspective on this, and other commissioners may have a different perspective. This city will continue to become denser. 82nd Avenue 20, 30 years from now is not going to be seen as out here, in air quotes, nor will it be seen as, quote, East Portland. It will be the center of Portland, because geographically it already is. And the opportunity that's here as a result of diversity, as a result of affordability, as a result of positive development opportunities that are still available here that aren't available in other parts of the city that have already been built out, or as some might say, gentrified. Those opportunities to shape the community still exist here in this 82nd Avenue corridor. So I think you're going to see it be transformational in the years ahead. Keep doing what you are doing. Invite us here often. Have me here. Yes, of course, I'll walk across 82nd Avenue with you. I would look forward to that opportunity. And I especially want to just gently nudge my colleagues. And I really appreciate that we have two of our great state representatives that are here in the room. Michael Dembro and Alyssa Kenny-Geyer have been tremendously supportive of this community. We do need to transfer 82nd Avenue. And the reason it hasn't happened yet is there's some tough negotiations and agreements that have to be hammered out between the city and the state. And it's not as simple as just saying, hey, can you transfer this street here, lock, stock, and barrel? There's really a negotiation around resources that also has to take place. And I know Transportation Commissioner Saltzman has been very aggressive on conversations in general with ODOT and with the state, and will continue to partner with them and hopefully make that a reality in the very near future. I'm going to stop because I obviously could keep going. But this was a great use of my time tonight, and I hope you feel like it has been a good use of your time. I'm really impressed with the vision and the energy and the desire to see this become the great part of our community as it deserves to be.
Thank you, Mayor. Dan, did you have any comments?
Well, I too am very encouraged by the turnout tonight. I just want to, add a couple things that I think are relevant to this discussion. First of all, I want to thank my colleagues on the City Council for investing heavily in the Vision Zero implementation. And a lot of that work is going to be happening on Outer Division and on other streets around Southeast Portland, and including 82nd. And secondly, on the jurisdictional transfer, I once again want to thank Senator Dembro and Rep. Kenny Geyer because the state transportation package that just passed, the $5 billion plus package, includes $100 million for jurisdictional transfer of Outer PAL to the city. And so that's a big development. And hopefully, if we can show that we can get it right on Outer PAL, we can go back to the legislature and ask them to work with ODOT to make sure there's further resources to deal with other roads like 82nd or Barber Boulevard, other roads that are also state highways through the city. But I think that's a real solid step, and I want to thank our legislators for their leadership.
Chloe or Amanda, did you have anything?
Sure. Well, first, I'd just like to thank everyone for being here and for having us. This was a very informative event. I want to echo the mayor's sentiments. We, of course, want to hear your concerns, but what's even more exciting to me is hearing your solutions, because as residents and business owners in this community, you really understand the needs of the community better than anyone else, and there were some amazing, exciting solutions proposed tonight. I just jotted down a few things I wanted to touch on in no specific order. One, it's very heartening to hear so many of you speak about the need for affordable housing, because we do have other communities in the city that would prefer not to have affordable housing and are resisting any kind of change in their neighborhoods and communities. And it's inevitable, and it's really great to hear you embracing that and emphasizing the importance of affordability. I know that people in this community are already being displaced. It's not like it hasn't reached East Portland yet, but I hope that you can learn from the failures and maybe some successes in the more central city and get further ahead of it than we have in other neighborhoods. I see a real opportunity here to mitigate displacement for your residents as well as your small business owners, because as was mentioned several times, they're an essential part of this community too. Yes, we need to develop humane policies around homelessness. My bureau, ONI, is going to be creating 2 new positions where there'll be liaisons to work with neighborhoods specifically on affordable housing and homelessness issues. So I'm excited for that to begin. And the other thing I want to mention is, some of you may know, I also have Bureau of Development Services, and that's where all the permitting happens that some people have been complaining about tonight. I want to let everyone know that we're working hard to make that process easier and faster and more efficient, and I have requested that we bring back a small business concierge to BDS. Oh, well, thanks. That was not the thing I expected to get applause on, but I will take all the applause I can get, because I just took the fascinating Life of a Permit tour at BDS, and they should definitely serve adult beverages on that tour. It's tough to make it through. Oh, yeah, more applause. But it is an onerous process for homeowners and small business owners, and as a former small business owner, I recognize that those costs and those waiting periods can be the difference between opening your business and not. So I just want to recognize that that's a real issue and that we're working on it. And thank you again.
Amanda?
Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. This community has a long history of successful activism. I remember one of the first community meetings I came to was at Vernon Elementary in about 2005, something like that, when Randy Leonard and others, Commissioner Leonard, were listening to the community who demanded that the city do something about the level of human trafficking on 82nd Avenue. It gave me great pleasure during my 2008 campaign to do waving with my signs on 82nd and listening to people talk about taking back their community, and that's what has happened here. Also, there's a lot of opportunities. I think of this building over here when I was at the opening for that. It's really transformed. PCC is a place. It's a something. It's a wonderful thing. And I think when this corner gets developed with even more of a wonderful thing, it's going to create that center and that feeling that, yes, indeed, everybody, people in Portland generally care about 82nd Avenue, not just the people who live and work and own businesses here. I do want to also recognize that the Montevilla Neighborhood Association was the first, as I know of, to have their neighborhood night out sponsored by a cannabis business last year. And I think one of the things I'm really happy about in terms of the variety of businesses along 82nd is it's not dominated by any particular type of business, and that there has been successful integration of some of the cannabis businesses which can bring prosperity to people who previously were disadvantaged by cannabis prohibition. So it was mentioned that we're going to have about 1.5 million of ongoing money from cannabis taxes that will be going to Vision Zero. Tomorrow, Commissioner Saltzman's going to have a hearing on how his Bureau of Transportation had been planning to use the existing money that they had for Vision Zero. Later in the fall, they're going to be coming back with a proposal which has included a lot of community inputs into how to start spending that cannabis tax money so that it does make our streets safer and it does benefit communities who have been disadvantaged. So I'm really excited about that process. And then finally, it is the summer, and Portland Parks and Recreation has the Summer Free for All that's going. Everywhere where there are free school lunches at schools, then there's now free lunches in the parks. And our guides are in 9 different languages. So, you know, come out to a concert or a movie at the park, or just go watch the children playing at some of the playground programs. I was just out at Mount Tabor yesterday looking at having the kickoff for the program. And it really does make me proud as a Portlander to recognize that we are cherishing our children and making sure that they have 1 meal a day at least during the summer, and that they do have healthy, constructive things to do, that the teens have things to do at Montevilla Community Center. And so that's, it's not nearly as brick and mortar as this traffic safety issues, but it is helping families, helping individuals have fun, which also is, I think, part of what our city should be doing. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much. It is 7 minutes to 8, and I know there was a couple of you that still wanted to have some comment, so I want to honor that request. So, Michael?
Thank you. So, I just want to quickly just kind of run over a couple of points. One is that I've lived within a mile, I guess, of this exact building my whole life. I'm 21 years old, so lived here for 21 years. I was born and raised here, and one of the things I kind of want to emphasize is the air quality, I guess, around this area. I live on the block over there, surrounded by Division, Powell, 82nd, and the freeway, basically. So it comes almost as no surprise where I have asthma, and so does my 3 siblings. So all the children in my family have asthma. And I have heard of other children in our neighborhood having asthma, so it's like, I mean, yeah, you can, do statistics like, oh, yeah, the air quality is bad, but I just want to at least share my testimony that, yeah, it's real. Like, we have asthma, and we struggle with it. Like, a couple of times my sister, had to go to the emergency room because she can't breathe. So that's one. And one of the things is the area we talked about, development on unpaved roads. And one of the ideas I really liked was a park, because growing up, I like basketball, so trying to find where to play basketball. The court at Harrison Park isn't that great. So, having to walk maybe all the way to Lens, either Mount Tabor or somewhere else to find a decent court to play on. I would love to have a park in my neighborhood where, that's just a couple of minutes away versus maybe a 10 or 15-minute walk for us kids. Because a group of us, because when I was, in 6th grade or 8th grade, there was like 7 of us were, okay, which park do we go to now? And so we, walk for 20 minutes to find somewhere to play. And the other thing is I've heard Commissioner Udaley also talk about that we are being displaced currently. More frequently, we get letters, like I pick up the mail usually when I come back from work, and I will see little things in the mail where it says, if you're ready to sell your home now, talk to us. So many basically people wanting to buy our houses, and it's somewhat annoying. And I've enjoyed living in a single family house my whole life. My best memories have been playing in my backyard. My brothers and I, we do so many things in our backyard, from in the winter playing, making snowmen, snowball fights, snow forts, all sorts of things. We're just playing soccer or volleyball in the summer. And so it's kind of disheartening where I know other people struggle to live in my area. Like even the value of my home, it's almost doubled within the past few years. And where at least the benefit is that we moved in the house we're living currently 15 years ago. So we had the benefit of kind of before the sky, where the prices went up. But I know other people who either wanted to move in the area or just moved in are seeing the rent prices go up. So it's just one of the things to kind of keep in mind of that, as I guess we wait for things to happen, there currently are things and issues that kind of need immediate addressing. But thank you for you guys for coming here, because I do appreciate, you guys making it over here and we're spending the 2 hours over here hearing our testimony. So thank you for being here and thank you for hearing me out.
I want to do a time check. We're 2 minutes away from 8 o'clock. So do we want to continue, or what would you like to do? It's really up to you. Okay, you have to go. Okay, can I close? Maybe a soft closing. I know Mayor Wheeler has to go. But I want to thank everyone for being here. And I hope that each of you have begun to reimagine 82nd Avenue, and that you leave today with a tremendous sense of optimism, inspiration, and respect for the future that could be for the corridor. I had so many takeaways, but they've been repeated, so I'm not going to repeat any more. But I want to say, I have 3 hopes, more than 3 really, of the corridor and its communities. Number 1, unity, diversity, health and well-being, stability, and resiliency. So we are at 8 o'clock, and we can adjourn if you like, or we can continue. So if you need to go, I know you have to go. I thank you so much for you being here.